Black teen humiliated during reading until they realized she inherited everything. The mahogany-paneled room smelled of leather, dust, and quiet tension. Every wall was lined with books, but not the kind anyone actually read anymore. These were relics, leather-bound volumes with gold embossing, reminders of family's wealth, power, and history. 17-year-old Naomi Carter sat stiffly in one of the heavy chairs, her dark skin illuminated by the afternoon light filtering through high windows. She wasn't supposed to be here. At least, that's what the sharp stares around the table kept saying, without words. The rest of the family, white polished, dripping with generational entitlement, looked at her as if she were an intruder. She could hear their whispers before the lawyer even began. She doesn't belong. Why would father invite her to this? She's just a charity case he dragged from the city. Naomi's fist clenched in her lap. She wasn't a charity case. She wasn't a mistake. She had been raised by her grandmother in a poor district of New Atlanta, never knowing much about the biological father her grandmother hinted at but never named. When her grandmother died, Naomi thought she was completely alone until a letter arrived from a man named Reginald Van Hurst III, one of the wealthiest industrialists on earth. The letter had been an invitation, a summons, and now here she was, inside the heart of the Van Hurst family's estate, surrounded by people who hated her for existing. At the head of the table, the family lawyer, a thin, bald man named Mr. Klein, cleared his throat. Ladies and gentlemen, as executor of the late Reginald Van Hurst estate, I am here to read the contents of his last will and testament. The room fell silent. The Van Hursts leaned forward eagerly. Naomi swallowed hard. The humiliation. The will began predictably. Reginald Van Hurst III left tokens of wealth and property to his legitimate children and grandchildren, a chain of luxury estates, stock shares in orbital mining companies, vaults of antique art, and off-world patents. Each time Mr. Klein announced an inheritance, the family erupted into smug nods and whispers. Then came the cutting words. And finally, Mr. Klein said, peering over his glasses, to Naomi Carter, the testator's granddaughter, through his estranged son, I leave. Every eye turned toward Naomi, cold and sharp as glass. A single locket. Snickers broke out around the table. One cousin even laughed openly. A locket? That's it. She traveled all this way for that. Poor thing. She thought she was one of us. Mr. Klein held up a small silver locket. Inside, it carried a faded photograph of a young Reginald and a woman Naomi had never seen before. Naomi's cheeks burned as she took it. She wanted to sink into the floor. She wanted to scream. But instead, she sat frozen while the family enjoyed her humiliation. The lawyer closed the file with a sharp snap. That concludes the public reading. The family rose, satisfied. Several of them muttered things just loud enough for Naomi to hear. She doesn't belong. She thought she was special. Back to the gutter, girl. Tears threatened, but Naomi refused to let them see her cry. She held the locket tightly and forced herself to breathe. She would leave this place. She would never give them the satisfaction of seeing her broken. But then Mr. Klein's voice cut through the chatter. Now, there remains a private addendum to the will, to be read in the presence of Miss Carter alone. The room stilled. What? Demanded one of the heirs. Why her? Another snapped. I'm afraid those are Mr. Van Hurst's explicit instructions, Klein said firmly. If the rest of you would kindly vacate the room. The protest rose into chaos, but security guards ushered the heirs out. Naomi sat trembling, alone now with the lawyer. The revelation. Klein studied her over folded hands. Miss Carter, you must understand, the locket is not your true inheritance. It is merely the key. Naomi blinked. The key to what? Klein smiled faintly and pressed a finger to the locket. The silver shimmered, and a holographic projection burst into the air. Reginald Van Hurst III appeared as a recording, tall, commanding, his voice steady even in death. Naomi, if you are hearing this, then fate has carried out the course I designed. My so-called family, the Van Hursts you just met, are vultures. They know only greed. I built an empire, yes, but I did not build it for them. I built it for the future. And you, my granddaughter, are that future. Naomi's breath caught. The locket contains genetic recognition. It will grant you access to my private holdings, assets the rest of the family knows nothing about. Naomi, you are my sole heir. You inherit everything. The Van Hurst conglomerate, the orbital shipyards, the terraforming contracts on Europa, the fleet of starliners, the AI patents. All of it. The hologram paused. They will hate you for this. They will try to take it from you. But you must stand firm. I saw in you, even from afar, the strength and brilliance your father once had before he was lost. The world is changing, Naomi, and it will need a leader who knows both struggle and vision. That leader is you. The hologram flickered out. Naomi sat in stunned silence. Everything? She had inherited everything? Klein nodded gravely. It is true. Effective immediately, the Van Herst conglomerate recognizes you as primary shareholder and owner. Security, financial accounts, and governing rights are yours. By law, none of them can dispute it. Naomi's heart raced. She had entered the room as a joke, a target of scorn. Now she was the most powerful person any of them would ever know. The struggle, the revelation, did not stay private for long. Within hours, the Van Herst heirs knew the truth. Outrage swept through the estate like wildfire. They can't do this. She's just a girl. She doesn't even know the first thing about running a corporation. Attempts were made. Legal challenges, smear campaigns, even veiled threats in the night. Naomi found herself under constant guard, escorted by armored vehicles to the streets of New Atlanta. Media swarmed, their drones buzzing overhead. Reporters shouted, "Naomi, how does it feel to own the largest industrial fleet in the solar system? Are you qualified to lead given your background? Do you fear retaliation from your family?" Naomi, trembling but resolute, answered as best she could. "My grandfather entrusted me with this responsibility. I won't run from it. I intend to honor his vision." But privately, fear gnawed at her. She was 17. She had no business training, no allies, no roadmap for navigating the galaxy's largest conglomerate. Until the locket spoke again. One night, in the solitude of her quarters, the locket projected another hologram. This time, an AI avatar of her grandfather. "Naomi," it said, "I anticipated your uncertainty. That is why I created this. A cognitive imprint of my knowledge and strategies. I will guide you. You will not be alone." And so began her true inheritance. Not just wealth, but wisdom. The rise. Months passed. Under the AI's mentorship, Naomi immersed herself in the labyrinth of corporate politics, starship engineering, and interplanetary economics. She studied late into the night, absorbing everything. Her enemies underestimated her. They thought she was a naive girl. But Naomi's life in the city had already sharpened her instincts. She knew survival. She knew resilience. Now she married that grit with the knowledge of a titan. At her first board meeting, the Van Herst executives smirked when she entered. By the time she left, they were silent. She had outlined a plan for expanding orbital mining operations in the asteroid belt, presented projections that outpaced anything they considered, invoked legal clauses none of them had remembered. Naomi Carter was no longer an intruder. She was their leader. The return. The day came when the extended family was summoned once more, this time not to a reading, but to the grand hall of Van Herst Tower in New Atlanta. They arrived sneering, expecting perhaps that Naomi had failed and would be begging for reconciliation. Instead, they found her seated at the head of the long obsidian table, dressed in a sleek suit that shimmered with threads of silver nanoweave. Holographic displays floated around her, showing the booming profits of the conglomerate under her leadership. The cousins who had once mocked her fell silent. The aunts and uncles who had called her a mistake shifted uncomfortably. Naomi let the silence hang before speaking. "You all laughed when I received this locket," she said, holding it up. "You thought I was nothing. But my grandfather saw what you could not. And now the world sees it too. I am Naomi Carter. I am Van Herst. And this empire is mine to lead." Her voice did not tremble. The family sat in stunned defeat. None dared speak. Naomi rose from her chair. "You may hate me. That is your choice. But remember this. I will not let this empire rot under greed and arrogance. It will serve humanity, not just itself. That is my promise. If any of you wish to be part of that vision, then prove it. If not, get out of my way." She turned and walked from the hall, every step echoing with power. The legacy. Years later, historians would write of Naomi Carter's reign as the most transformative era in the Van Herst conglomerate's history. She expanded humanity's reach into the stars, championed equality in her workforce, and pioneered technologies that reshaped worlds. But Naomi never forgot that first day. The humiliation, the laughter, the locket in her trembling hands. It became her fuel, her reminder that greatness often begins in the shadows of doubt. And when she looked out across the galaxy she now commanded, she whispered softly to herself, "They thought I was nothing, but I inherited everything.